Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Whether it's a quiet cul-de-sac in Arizona, a busy apartment block in New York, or a peaceful lakeside cabin up in Minnesota. I love hearing just how far these Karen tales of chaos and karma can travel. The air was crisp that evening, carrying the faint scent of pine and water. I had come out to my ranch lake to enjoy the kind of peace only wide open land can offer. The surface of the water shimmered under the moonlight, and I had just settled into my fold-out chair beside a small fire. My boots rested on the dirt, a mug of steaming coffee warmed my hand, and the only sounds were the crackle of flames and the rhythmic chorus of crickets. After a week of non-stop work, this was the reset I needed: quiet solitude, and the satisfaction of being on land that was mine through and through. That peace didn't last. Out of nowhere, headlights sliced through the dark, bouncing along the gravel path that led down to the lake. A car door slammed, then another, and two shrill voices broke the night air. My stomach sank. I knew those voices. Eva and Nancy, the Karen sisters. They came striding toward me like they owned the place. The crunch of gravel under their flats was quick and purposeful, their silhouettes waddling closer, arms waving before they were even within earshot. Eva, the slightly taller one, was wrapped in a floral orange dress that looked 2 sizes too small. Nancy followed beside her, in a green patterned blouse stretched across her round frame. Both wore the same pinched expression, the kind that said they weren't here to talk, they were here to fight. "What do you think you're doing out here?" Eva barked, pointing toward the campfire as if it were a crime scene. "You can't just set up camp wherever you please. This is HOA land." I blinked at her, taking a slow sip of coffee before answering. "You've got that wrong. This lake belongs to me. Every inch of it. Deeded, documented, and fenced." I gestured toward the no trespassing sign posted a few yards away, shining faintly in the glow of the fire. Nancy scoffed, her hands planted firmly on her hips. "Don't play smart. This lake is part of the community grounds. You're breaking HOA rules by staying overnight." The absurdity nearly made me laugh, but my patience had limits. I set down the mug and leaned forward in my chair. "Ladies, this isn't your subdivision backyard. This is a private ranch, my private ranch. I've got the paperwork to prove it." They ignored my words as if they hadn't heard a syllable. Eva raised her phone, the screen lighting her face with a bluish glow. "Then you won't mind explaining that to the police?" "Because I'm calling them right now." The smirk that spread across her face was the kind of smugness only someone completely in the wrong could wear. Nancy chimed in. "Let's see you explain camping out here to an officer. Let's see how fast that little fire of yours gets shut down." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're serious? You're really calling the cops on me for sitting at my own lake?" "Serious as a heart attack," Eva shot back. Her stubby fingers danced across the phone screen as she spoke loudly enough for me to hear every word. "Yes, officer. We've got a suspicious man out here by the lake. He's camping illegally. We need someone to come down right away." My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. "You're making a mistake you can't walk back. You're trespassing on my land, harassing me, and wasting law enforcement's time. That's not going to end the way you think." Eva smirked even wider. Nancy crossed her arms, grinning like they had already won. "We'll see about that," she said. Minutes later, the sound of tires on gravel reached us. Red and blue lights washed over the trees, reflecting in the water like a distorted kaleidoscope. A county sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop near my truck. The door opened and out stepped a uniformed officer, his flashlight cutting across the campfire glow. He approached with a cautious, professional stride. "Evening," he said, scanning the scene. His gaze lingered on the sisters, who immediately launched into a synchronized performance of outrage. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Eva began dramatically. "This man is trespassing. He's camping illegally on community land. We've told him to leave, but he refuses." Nancy added, "We're HOA board members. We know the rules. He's not allowed to be here." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, then turned his flashlight toward me. "Sir, can I see some ID and any proof you might have of ownership?" Of course. I stood calmly, reaching into my truck parked a few yards away. I retrieved a folder I always kept handy, the deed, the plat map, and my identification. I handed them over, without hesitation. This is my land, Deputy. All of it, including this lake. I've owned it for 6 years. The officer examined the papers under his flashlight, flipping carefully through each page. His expression shifted from suspicion to certainty. He looked back at the sisters, who were fidgeting now, whispering furiously to each other. These documents check out, the sheriff said firmly. The lake and surrounding property are legally deeded to him. This is not HOA jurisdiction. Eva's mouth fell open. That can't be right. Our HOA rules say. Your rules stop at the community boundary. The sheriff cut her off. This lake isn't within that boundary. Which means, ladies, you're the ones trespassing. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the crackle of my fire. Eva's face flushed deep red. Nancy sputtered, searching for words that wouldn't come. We didn't know. We thought. You thought wrong, the sheriff said bluntly. And calling in a false report wastes county resources. I strongly suggest you two head home and stay off this property. Do it again, and you'll be cited. The sisters' smugness melted into a sticky mixture of shock and humiliation. They stammered apologies that didn't sound sincere, then turned on their heels and shuffled back toward their car. Gravel crunched under their hurried steps. The headlights flared once again, and within seconds the vehicle was gone, swallowed by the night. The sheriff handed me back my documents with a nod. Sorry for the disturbance, sir. You have a good evening. I thanked him, watching as his cruiser rolled away, the lights dimming in the distance, until only the steady chirp of crickets remained. My fire flickered lower, but the heat in my chest burned stronger. Eva and Nancy had crossed a line tonight, and I could feel in my bones they weren't finished. People like them never stop at one attempt. Their arrogance couldn't handle being wrong, especially in front of an authority figure. I stared out at the lake, the moonlight rippling across the surface. The peace I'd come for had been shattered, and in its place a new certainty settled in. This wasn't over. Tonight had been a warning shot. The real battle was still ahead. The following morning, the lake looked as calm as ever, but I knew better. Peace doesn't survive long when people like Eva and Nancy are circling. By midweek, their retaliation had already begun. I drove down to the water's edge only to find trash scattered across the shoreline, greasy fast food bags, soda cans, even a broken lawn chair tossed into the shallows. The stench of old fries and rotting paper wrappers soured the crisp air. It was deliberate, too obvious to be random. They wanted me to feel invaded, disrespected. I stood there in silence, fists clenched, letting the insult sink in. 2 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. The HOA letterhead was stamped across the top in bold blue. I tore it open and scanned the contents. According to this so-called notice, I was in violation of community camping restrictions and must vacate what they called a non-approved recreational zone. They had the audacity to write it like some official decree, dripping with authority they didn't have. The absurdity of it all would have been laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. They weren't trying to keep me from camping. They were trying to steal ownership by layering false authority. If they could convince enough neighbors that the lake belonged to the HOA, then I'd become the outsider, the squatter. And once that seed was planted, undoing it would be hell. I realized their strategy wasn't just petty, it was calculated. I decided to confront them through the proper channel. The next HOA meeting was that Friday night, and I showed up with every deed and plat map tucked under my arm. The community hall buzzed with chatter when I walked in. Folded metal chairs lined the room, and a long table at the front served as the board's throne. Eva and Nancy sat there side by side, smug and expectant, like judges waiting to hand down a sentence. Eva spotted me instantly. She leaned toward Nancy and whispered something that made her sister giggle. Then she cleared her throat and spoke loudly enough for the room to hush. Well, look who finally decided to join us. The trespasser himself. Murmurs spread through the crowd. I held up the folder calmly. I'm here to set the record straight. That lake doesn't belong to the HOA. It's deeded private property. Mine. And I've got every legal document to prove it. Nancy rolled her eyes with theatrical disdain. Paperwork can be faked. For all we know, you're squatting until the county throws you out. I laid the documents on the front table for everyone to see. Maps, signatures, county stamps. Proof carved in ink. But the sisters never even glanced at them. Eva waved her hand dismissively. We don't need to see your props. We know the rules. That land falls under our community's oversight, and you're in violation every time you set foot out there. Their arrogance was suffocating. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably, clearly unconvinced but too timid to speak up. The sisters' voices dominated the room like gongs, drowning out reason. I tried again, explaining boundaries, citing county parcels, pointing out that the HOA map stopped at the subdivision fence line. But it was like explaining daylight to people who insisted the sun didn't exist. At that moment, I understood something important. Evidence didn't matter to them. Truth didn't matter. They thrived on noise, on intimidation, on the illusion of control. I could wave county records in their faces all night, and they would still sneer and shout me down. So I stopped arguing. I picked up my documents and walked out, ignoring their snide laughter trailing behind me. It looked like they had won that round, but I wasn't discouraged. Quite the opposite. That meeting crystallized everything. If I wanted to shut them down, I couldn't do it with paperwork. I needed a weapon sharper than words, proof that would slice through their lies so cleanly they couldn't squirm away. That night, back at the ranch, I laid out my plan. Technology would be my ally. I dug out my wildlife cameras, small and camouflaged, the kind designed to track deer along trails. I set them up along the lake's edge, angled toward the paths I knew the sisters favored when sneaking onto the property. I rigged up a drone too, ready to record from the sky at a moment's notice. Within days, my patience paid off. The first footage showed Eva waddling down the bank with a picnic basket, Nancy trailing behind with a folding chair. They spread out a blanket on my shore, sipping soda, laughing loudly, tossing wrappers into the water, as if they were planting flags of conquest. Another clip captured Nancy splashing waist-deep in the lake, shouting, "This is ours now," while Eva filmed her on her phone, narrating about taking back the community's pond. The gall was breathtaking, but the more I watched, the calmer I felt. Every second of footage was a nail in their coffin. The cameras recorded them littering, trespassing, vandalizing, even bragging into their phones about their ownership. Their arrogance had become my ammunition. I compiled everything into a neatly labeled folder: video files, timestamps, still shots. Each image painted the same picture. Two self-proclaimed enforcers caught red-handed breaking every rule they claimed to defend. The next HOA gathering arrived quicker than expected. This time, I walked in without a folder papers. Instead, I carried a small projector under my arm. The sisters were already holding court, whispering with neighbors, smirks plastered on their faces like victory banners. They didn't see what was coming. When the meeting started, Eva launched into a tirade about unauthorized activity at the lake. She waved a printed letter for dramatic effect, her voice pitched high with false outrage. Nancy echoed her, insisting fines should be imposed on me immediately. A few neighbors nodded nervously, caught in the tide of their confidence. I let them talk. I let them dig deeper, stacking lies until the tower wobbled. Then, when the room finally turned to me, I set the projector on the table, plugged in my laptop, and cleared my throat. "You've all heard their accusations," I said evenly. "But maybe it's time you saw the truth." The wall flickered to life. The first video rolled. Eva and Nancy appeared on screen, waddling along the shore with their picnic basket. Gasps filled the room. A second clip followed. Nancy splashing in a lake, shouting ownership. More gasps, followed by murmurs. The sisters' faces drained of color. "Here's your so-called board members," I continued, my voice cutting through the rising noise. "Trespassing, littering, claiming property that doesn't belong to them. Everything they accuse me of, they're the ones guilty." The footage shifted again, showing Eva tossing wrappers into the water. Then Nancy, stomping on my no trespassing sign until it bent sideways. Their voices were unmistakable, their laughter sharp as nails. The room erupted. Neighbors who had stayed silent before now whispered loudly to each other, eyes fixed on the sisters with newfound disgust. Eva stammered, trying to speak, but the evidence drowned her out. Nancy sputtered, her hands waving uselessly as if she could erase the images hanging on the wall. I paused the video, letting the silence settle thickly around them. "So tell me again," I said quietly, almost a whisper, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Who's the trespasser here?" Eva's mouth opened, then closed. Nancy shook her head, face pale, words failing her for the first time. The power in the room had shifted. Their control, built on bluster and intimidation, had cracked wide open. I could see it in the neighbors' eyes, doubt turning to certainty, irritation hardening into anger. The sisters had wanted a stage, and I had given them one. Only now, instead of queens presiding over subjects, they were actors caught in their own scandal. And this was just the beginning. The silence in that meeting hall was suffocating, broken only by the hum of the projector and the rustle of restless neighbors. Eva and Nancy sat frozen in their chairs, their faces drained of their usual bravado, eyes darting around the room in panic. For once, their voices had failed them. I let the moment linger, let the neighbors drink in the sight of their so-called leaders exposed as hypocrites. But the show wasn't over, not by a long shot. What the sisters didn't know was that I had already taken the footage to the sheriff's office earlier that day. By the time the last clip played, the sound of boots echoed from the doorway. 2 deputies stepped inside, the glint of their badges catching the light. The room fell completely silent. Every head turned as the deputies approached the front table where Eva and Nancy sat trembling. One of them spoke with the kind of calm authority that cuts deeper than shouting. "Eva Mitchell? Nancy Mitchell? You're being served citations for trespassing, vandalism, and filing a false police report." The collective gasp that followed seemed to shake the walls. Eva stuttered, her words tumbling into each other. This is ridiculous. We were protecting the community. We didn't trespass, we were enforcing rules. The deputy didn't even blink. He set the paperwork in front of them, his voice flat. "You've been caught on camera multiple times. You'll have your chance to explain in court." Nancy tried to snatch the papers off the table and crumple them, but another deputy calmly stopped her hand. The room filled with hushed whispers and the occasional stifled laugh. Their neighbors, once too afraid to oppose them, now stared with thinly veiled satisfaction. The air had shifted. The sisters weren't untouchable anymore. They sputtered excuses all the way to the door, their voices growing shrill, but nobody came to their defense. The deputies escorted them outside, their protests echoing back into the hall. The meeting dissolved into a buzz of conversation. People shook their heads, chuckled under their breath, and a few even clapped me on the shoulder as I packed up the projector. For the first time, the neighborhood seemed united in one opinion, that the Karen sisters had finally been put in their place. But humiliation in a meeting hall wasn't enough. These women had made it their mission to harass and intimidate, to bully me into submission, and they had dragged the entire community into their scheme. If there was one thing people like Eva and Nancy hated more than losing, it was losing publicly. That was the weapon I intended to use. That night, I uploaded the footage to a local community forum. No editing, no commentary. Just the raw clips of Eva and Nancy trespassing, vandalizing, and declaring ownership of what wasn't theirs. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, half horrified, half amused. Neighbors from nearby towns shared it, mocking the sisters' antics, calling them the Lake Karens, creating memes that plastered their faces onto lifeguard chairs and beach floats. The sisters had wanted attention, but now they were drowning in it. By morning, even people outside our county were laughing at their absurdity. Local news outlets picked up the story, running it under headlines that made the sisters look like a comedy act gone wrong. Eva tried to post a statement defending herself, blaming me for doctoring videos. But the damage was irreversible. The harder they tried to deny, the louder the ridicule grew. The court date came quickly. I walked into the county courthouse with my documents and my footage neatly prepared. The sisters arrived flustered, hair messy, makeup smudged, their floral dresses wrinkled and unflattering under the fluorescent lights. They tried to glare at me, but the fire in their eyes was dimmed, smothered by the weight of public scorn. The judge didn't take long. He reviewed the deeds, the maps, the clear footage of trespass, and the police reports. His ruling was decisive, spoken in a tone that left no room for misinterpretation. The property in question is private land, solely owned by the plaintiff. The defendants are guilty of repeated trespassing and vandalism. They are hereby fined, placed on probation, and barred from approaching the property again. Furthermore, their false report to law enforcement will remain on record. Eva gasped as if struck. Nancy muttered something incoherent, her voice breaking halfway through. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, sealing their fate. Word of the verdict spread even faster than the video had. The HOA board stripped them of their positions within days, citing misconduct and loss of trust. Their influence evaporated overnight. Neighbors who once feared their wrath now openly mocked them, recounting their downfall at backyard barbecues and over morning coffee. For Eva and Nancy, every trip to the grocery store became a walk of shame, every glance a reminder that their reign was over. For me, the weight lifted. I returned to my ranch lake, this time with a renewed sense of calm. I built a larger campfire, invited a few friends to join me, and let laughter carry across the water. The lake sparkled under the stars, free from intrusion, the air crisp and sweet again. The sound of boots crunching on gravel no longer carried dread but memory, proof that I had defended what was mine. As the fire burned lower, I thought about how easily they could have avoided all of it. A simple acknowledgement of truth would have saved them. But arrogance blinds people. They saw control slipping away and tried to grab it with both hands, not realizing the trap they were building for themselves. In the end, they weren't undone by me, or even by the sheriff. They were undone by their own hubris. I leaned back in my chair, the crackling fire warming my face, and let out a long breath. Justice had been served, and not quietly. Eva and Nancy had called the cops to embarrass me, but it was them who ended up cuffed by ridicule, fined by the court, and abandoned by the very community they once ruled. The lake was mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit. Every ripple on its surface, every whisper of wind through the grass, reminded me of victory. And as for the sisters, they had become living reminders of what happens when you trespass too far, on land, on truth, and on people's patience. The story should have ended there, neat and complete, but I knew better. People like Eva and Nancy rarely disappear quietly. They might lick their wounds, sulk in the shadows, but they would always be plotting, always searching for a way to claw back the control they lost. I smiled at the thought. If they tried again, I'd be ready. The lake wasn't just water and land. It was a line they couldn't cross, and now the whole world knew it. If you enjoyed watching Karma Catch Up with the Karen sisters, make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA experience. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where justice always finds its way.